Good morning, Chair.
Good morning.
Chair, our first witness today and only witness today is Mr. Donald Gray.
Good morning, Mr. Gray.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Gray. I'm your usher. I'm going to swear you in today. I understand you're going to swear on the Bible.
Indeed.
Could you please take the Bible in your right hand and repeat after me? I swear by Almighty God
I swear by Almighty God
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Thank you.
Could you confirm your full name, please?
Yes, Donald Scott Gray.
Mr. Gray, do you have a copy of your witness statement in front of you?
I do, yes.
And if you turn to page 25 of that statement, is that your signature there?
It's actually page 24 on my copy.
Yes, sorry, you're quite right. Is that your signature there?
It is, yes.
Have you read through this statement recently?
Yes,
And is it true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
indeed. Yeah.
That statement is now in evidence. Everything that I ask you is supplementary. And first, thank you very much for preparing a witness statement and for coming to give evidence today. I'm going to start by asking you a few questions about your background. You joined the Post Office in 1963 as an executive officer, is that right?
Yes,
And from 1986 to June 1993, you were district manager for the Post Office, is that right?
yes, that's right.
And what did that role involve?
That was looking after post offices across 4 counties in the North Midlands. I can't remember how many there were at the time. Must have been about 300, I think.
And in June 1993, you moved to Leeds on business reorganisation, and you became a regional general manager for the North East region, is that right?
Yes, that was later. I did another role before I became regional manager. That was in 1997.
You're quite right. And then as part of your time in that position, you were involved in a live trial on Horizon, is that correct?
Yes, some of my offices were actually involved in the early part of Horizon, but not right at the outset.
What was your experience of that like?
It was very much a business as usual role in many respects. This was a slightly different take on what we were normally doing in post offices. But clearly there were issues that we had to monitor there to make sure that we were supporting the team in actually rolling out Horizon and learning from the opportunity that this trial gave us.
Did you feel that it was a positive, negative experience or neutral?
I think it was mixed. I think there was general acceptance that it was an opportunity to modernise the business, but it didn't come without its problems.
And is that the feedback that you were receiving from sub-postmasters at that time?
Yes, indeed. Yes, it was fairly positive, but there were some things that really needed to change to make things better.
And in summer 1999, you undertook a project to improve the efficiency of the branch office network, is that right?
That's right. That lasted for a few months, yeah.
What did that involve?
It was really working with the unions to try and find a way of reducing the costs that the branch office network was incurring for the business.
In January 2000, you were appointed as Horizon National Rollout Project Manager. Can you tell us a bit about that role?
Well, that particular role, I was not responsible for a whole of the Horizon project, but just for the preparation, the training and the installation across the network. Others were responsible for the live environment, contract management, software acceptance and business assurance and other aspects.
And then in July 2001, you moved to lead the business service management function. Is that right?
Yes, that's when the Horizon National Rollout Project had effectively finished.
And what did that role involve?
That was lead on the provision of supplies and support to the post office network, and it included supply management of internal post office partners, such as Cashco stores and customer management, as well as the ICL Horizon help desk.
You then retired in March 2003, is that right?
Yeah, it's the best job I've ever had.
When you took over, going back to the role of Horizon National Rollout Project Manager, did you have a handover from David Miller and his team?
Not that I recall. I did have quite a lot of discussions with people who were involved in the project directly at that point in time. But I don't recall any direct discussion with Dave Miller himself.
What did those discussions involve?
It was really an update on what the situation was to date, because I had been out of the scene as far as Horizon was concerned for a few months. And of course, there was a lot happening at that point in time before the system had been accepted and national rollout could continue.
Were you ever made aware of the Project Mentors report?
Sorry, the what?
Project Mentors report. Have you ever heard of it?
It doesn't ring any bells, sorry.
And when you took over in January 2000, were you aware of any problems with EPOS, or the electronic point of sale?
Not directly. I knew there were certain acceptance incidents that had been the subject of discussion between the Post Office and ICL, but not specifically about EPOS.
If we could turn up the first document, please. That's POL 3090457. It should come up on your screen in a moment. We can see here that this is an email, and you're on the distribution list. I think you're halfway down. And this is an email from Jonathan Rogers. And if we turn over to page 3, we can see that this is a BSM, so that's a Business Service Management Snapshot Report. And we can see that this is a report setting out issues with cash account balances on Wednesday, the 21st of July, from 2 live trial outlets. Looking beside the second 9, it says officers reported losses and gains, 3 of which may have been migration errors. And it sets out the figure of total loss discrepancy and total gain discrepancy. So before you took over your role, you'd received emails setting out that there were issues with discrepancies in terms of cash account balancing. Is that right?
I don't recall them, in fairness, no.
Did you receive a lot of emails like this at the time?
I can't recall the number, but it was quite common that we were kept in the loop about things that were happening.
That document can come down, please. If we could turn up POL 000284663. And this is another email from September 1999. So again, before you took over as the project manager. And we can again see your name midway through the distribution list. And it's an email from, I think, Keith Hardy, which we can see if we turn over to page 2. And looking at that first paragraph, it says, as you know, we have been going through the acceptance process for Horizon, while ICL work on some technical issues that emerged during the trial. I'm pleased to say progress has been made on these issues, and as a result, we've been able to agree to installing the equipment in a further 336 offices from the 20th of September, on top of the 150 offices we had already agreed to. This will bring the total number of offices in the trial to some 810, and I will update you on further news as it is available. Please feel free to communicate this information to your teams if they want an update on the latest position. And if we scroll down, we can see that you're given a public line about the reasons for this. And if we look at the 5th bullet point, it says, if asked about what the issues are, we are going through a difficult phase in the Horizon discussions. As a result, it wouldn't be appropriate for us to discuss the details of the issues publicly, but we are hoping they will be resolved quickly, and we will then be able to resume offering the services service in all Horizon offices. So at this time again, there seems to be a lot of discussion about issues that have been identified with the system that you're being copied into.
Yes,
And
but in fairness, I think I'd moved off the general manager role at that point, and I was actually doing the branch office efficiency project. So although I was copied into that particular email, it wasn't of great relevance to me at that point in time.
so did you find that you were being copied in on things that didn't specifically require your attention at this time?
I can't recall, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Turning forward then to when you take over the role of the project manager in January 2000, if we can turn up NFSP 50261. And if we could turn to page 7. This is the Christmas Horizon Research Report, which we've turned to a number of times in this inquiry. And it was written by Lorna Green in January 2000. So this is right at the time you take over in this role, isn't it?
That's right, yes.
And if we turn to page 9, this gives the results of the telephone interviews. As it sets out in the introduction, this report gives the results of 330 telephone interviews with staff and agents whose offices have taken part in the Horizon rollout in the autumn of 1999. In these interviews, they were asked their opinion on different aspects of the Horizon system and various types of support available, including manuals and help desks, and their overall satisfaction with the automation programme. And under results and conclusions, it says results on almost all aspects of Horizon are mixed. Some staff and sub-postmasters are getting to grips with the system and are happy and satisfied, while others are struggling and continuously having problems. There are no obvious patterns by office type, IP area, number of counter positions, or the length of time since migration. However, where comparisons have been possible, these results are more favourable than the results from the live trial last June. And looking at the next paragraph, it says the main message coming through is that they are not getting enough training. They are mainly happy with what the 1.5 days they received, but the training on balancing is not long enough for their needs. And scrolling down to the bottom of that page, it says the other area for concern is help desks. There is confusion over which number to call, which is compounded by them being passed back and forth between help desks. There is a problem getting through to the Horizon System help desk in particular, and the service from both appears to be lacking in terms of consistency and knowledge. So there were big issues from the very beginning of your tenure about training in the help desk. Is that right?
Yes, yes. And it's perhaps not surprising that these situations happen because everybody was learning at the same time as we introduced Horizon into the business.
If we turn to page 13 of that report, the objectives of the report are set out, and the objectives of the research. It says the objective of the research was to evaluate how these 1,856 officers have found the Horizon system in order to identify any potential problems before national rollout commences. The major aspects of Horizon were to be covered, including the various types of support available. Did you understand, or did you speak to anyone before this report was commissioned?
No, because it had been commissioned and completed before I actually joined the project.
And did you know anything about why this research was done? Were there any particular concerns that people were aware of prior to its commission?
I suspect there may have been, but this report was really good background information. It gave us a benchmark on which to build and to actually identify any issues that were still current and that needed attention. And there were a number of actions which ensued from this report to actually improve things for everyone.
Turning to page 15, we can see the results of training there. It says opinion was split on the training, with 50% saying that training was good and 50% saying this was poor. This was similar to the results from the live trial research, except this time there are more respondents in the very poor category. So this is really quite concerning, isn't it? The feedback that you're getting about training at this stage.
It was, and as a consequence, there are a number of steps that were taken to improve the situation.
Turning over to page 16 and scrolling down, looking at balancing. It says nearly a fifth of respondents are finding balancing using Horizon very difficult, and a further quarter, 24%, are finding it fairly difficult. So balancing, again, that's a big problem, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
And turning to page 20, rather, it might be helpful to go back over the page to page 19. And scrolling down, please. This is to do with help desks. So it records there is some confusion over which help desk to call, which has deteriorated since the live trial. And back over to page 20. It seems 59% are satisfied with the help desk to some extent. So again, this is quite negative feedback, isn't it?
It was, and it perhaps supported the fact that one of the acceptance incidents that was being debated before I joined the project was related to the performance of the Horizon System Help Desk.
And turning to page 26, please. And scrolling down. Thank you. So it summarises the conclusions. Results on almost all aspects of Horizon are mixed. Some staff and sub-postmasters getting to grips with the system are happy and satisfied, while others are struggling and continuously having problems. And again, the third paragraph, the main message is coming through that they're not getting enough training. So when you got this report, what did you decide to do in light of it?
Well, some steps had already been taken. For example, in the second supplementary agreement, there'd been a move to increase the training by providing a user awareness event some 2 to 4 weeks before they actually went through training itself. And this was to really introduce learning as a process rather than as an event. And it became a gradual introduction to Horizon. Beyond that, there were improvements made in the balancing process. We diverted more staff to actually supporting offices during the rollout period and in the weeks thereafter. And we introduced a balancing guide as well, which again, another tool to actually make balancing easier for them. And as a consequence, we actually took the score from what was 19% on ease of balancing in the live trial right up to 90% within 12 months.
If we could turn to the next document, please, which is POL 000284441. This is an email from the author of the report. And we can see in the second paragraph of her email, she says, I strongly recommend you take time to browse through the staff and sub-postmasters' own words, as it provides insight into their strength of feeling about various aspects of Horizon. Was that message heard by you and other people in the post office?
Absolutely. I mean, we didn't go around with our eyes and ears shut. We were very alert to feedback like this because it was so important to us in trying to get things right.
Turning to the 20th of January 2000, if we could pick up POL 000285509. So this is an email from the 20th of January. So this was shortly after you started in the post, is that right?
That's right, yes.
And we can see you're on the distribution list, and this is from a Dick Brazier. And then if we can turn over the page. These are the notes of a Horizon Pathway delivery meeting, the 14th of January. And if we can scroll down, please. It says at paragraph 2, Dave Smith summarised the key areas which were at issue for the continuation of rollout on the 24th of January. These were the rectification of outstanding data integrity weaknesses, AI 3763, the clarification and resolution of weaknesses in help desk performance, AI 408/3, the resolution of issues with the management of reference data, and the satisfactory deployment and operation of integrity control. He identified that for each of these areas there was now an agreed way forward and that robust checks had been in place to address the original concerns. However, there were still further checks to be completed by TIP on the deployment of the integrity control. Further work also needed to be done between Horizon Commercial and ICL Pathway on reaching contractual agreement on the third supplemental agreement. So there, you're being made aware of the issues with the system and potential data integrity issues, aren't you?
Yes.
And at this stage,
about those before as well, because they've been part of the communications that I'd received when I was in the regional general manager post.
so when you were deciding what to do in relation to training, especially in respect of balancing, did you ever think, well, hold on a second, maybe there's something going wrong with the system rather than sub-postmasters not being able to balance properly?
Well, in fairness, it wasn't my role to engage with that particular problem. This was a business assurance problem, and it was for others to track that and identify it.
So
Clearly, we had to know about it because we didn't want to be rolling out a defective system, and at no time did we think we were doing so.
But you didn't feel it was your role to escalate concerns, that was for someone else?
No, because I didn't see those concerns directly. So, as I say, it was for others to pursue those.
That document can come down now. If we could turn up NFSP 50348, please. This is a letter to the NFSP, the head of the NFSP, Mr. Colin Baker, on the 1st of February 2000. So again, shortly after you took up the role. How did you find working with Colin Baker of the NFSP?
Fine, absolutely no problem. We knew each other in the past, and we were both very positive about what we were trying to do. I mean, Colin was very forthright, like so many others in the Federation of Sub-Postmasters, but we were always constructive in the way that we tried to resolve things.
Did you find dealing with the NFSP helpful?
Indeed. I mean, we couldn't have done this project without their involvement.
And if we could look, turning back to the document, if we could scroll down to the second paragraph. It says, since we paused rollout in November, we have taken a number of improvements to build on past experiences and provide the robust arrangements that we would all like to see to support a programme of around 300 outlets a week coming on stream. I note that Dave Smith has outlined most of these in his letter on the 31st of January, so I'll not repeat here. Suffice to say, if you need more detail on any of these, please let me know. Hopefully these improvements will have an evident beneficial effect and tackle the problems identified in the pre-Christmas research that was done via 335 telephone interviews with staff and agents who were involved in Horizon rollout during last autumn. And picking it up further down the paragraph, the research also showed, this is the fourth line from the bottom, that many more would like training and more training, and balancing is still difficult for too many. Certainly, we will need to continue to monitor the position as we go through the programme and respond to prevailing requirements as appropriate. Turning over the page and scrolling down, we can see that there are a number of issues raised about the help desk, and then there are a number of specific issues that have previously been raised by the NFSP. Is that right? You can see those there at A to E.
Yes.
Did you feel at this time, when you first took over the role, the NFSP were raising a lot of problems with the system with you?
They were raising a lot of problems with rollout rather than the system as such, in fairness.
And what problems were they raising about rollout? Are they recorded here?
Well, for example, item B there is about training, and that was about scheduling of training, I suspect.
Rather than the quality of the training itself?
At that point, yes.
Did anyone at the NFSP ever raise any data integrity issues with you?
Not that I recall, no, because that would have been proper to have dealt with business service management on that one, or transaction processing.
That document can come down, please. Turning forward slightly, if we could turn up NFSP 50287. And if we could, yeah, thank you. We've got an email from Mike Ingle on the 3rd of February 2000 to you, and this concerns losses at Waterloo Road. Who was Mike Ingle?
Mike Ingle was a retail network manager in the Leeds cluster, and he worked for me when I was regional general manager in the Northeast.
And why if we just read what this is about, it says the losses at this office were discussed at a review and authorised under our normal procedure for dealing with 8-week requests. From memory, 2 of the losses, totalling about 1,100, were known to be awaiting an error notice, and authority to hold these beyond 8 weeks was given. The large loss for about £3,000 was the subject of frequent discussions with the sub-postmaster, who could not accept that this was a genuine error and not down to Horizon. And then picking it up again on the final paragraph, it says, it is debatable as to whether this was due to operator error or glitch in the system. There is no evidence either way. The net result is that most of this large loss was accounted for. Why was Mike Ingle bringing this to you?
I suspect he was responding to an invitation which I issued to everybody that I dealt with to actually flag up any issues that were of concern to them. There was a recognised route for doing so via the business service management team, but I was also interested in knowing if there were any issues out there. So anything I could do to encourage feedback, I did so.
But you said a moment ago that you were nothing to do with the system itself. So why were you taking issues or, hearing feedback in relation to the system? Did you not clearly delineate those with the people you were speaking to?
I was happy for them to come to me, but I always made sure that they were fed into service management so that they could process them in the normal way of things. It certainly was important that we encourage people to tell us whenever there were suspected issues out there.
Do you remember receiving this email?
I don't remember it, to be in fairness, because I must have received a number at the time, and it is a long time ago. But it struck a chord when I read it.
Do you remember receiving any other emails like this?
Oh, I'm sure I did, but I couldn't begin to tell you what they were at this point in time.
Other emails about the integrity of the system as opposed to the performance of rollout? Do you think there may have been others?
There may have been others. As regards what the subject was, I don't know. The important thing was that we wanted people to share with us any concerns they had, whether it was rollout, whether it was system issues or whatever, because we wanted to get this thing right. The integrity of the business really depended on us doing so.
I appreciate you can't remember, but what do you think you would have done with an email like this?
With an email like this, I would have probably passed it to one of my team to follow through. One, to make sure it was on the business service management radar and was being followed to solution. And secondly, to make sure that there was sort of some feedback down the line as well. But the important thing was that we had processes in place which were actually there and designed to actually tackle problems like this whenever they were flagged up to us.
Moving forward to May 2000, if we could turn up FUJ 000757726. This is a diary note of the National Federation of Sub-Postmasters annual conference. Did you attend many events with the NFSP?
Yes, I did do. I mean, not necessarily on a national scale, but perhaps on a more local scale. I think this was probably the only time I spoke to their national conference.
And were you the person of contact in relation to the Horizon rollout at Post Office for the NFSP at this time?
It seemed to be so, yes, yes. I mean, they were encouraged to speak to others in the team, and not just to me. It wasn't a one-man band by any means. And I had 4 regional teams across the country, so there was many contacts at regional level between the Federation and my team.
And then would those teams then feed back any issues to you? Would they kind of filter up to you as the head of it?
Sure, if they were relevant to do so. Some of them could perhaps have been sorted out at their level.
Turning back to the document, if we could turn over to page 2 and scrolling down. And down again. We can see that you gave a presentation at this meeting. Do you remember that presentation?
To be honest with you, I'd forgotten all about the event altogether until Alan Johnson gave his testimony a few weeks ago. But I have seen the transcript of the speech I gave, which is the subject of another paper that you sent me.
And what can you tell us about this presentation? What was the purpose of giving it?
The purpose was to give an update on where we were, to give some positive messages, to recognise that there were problems and to assure them that we were actually dealing with them. But to put it in the context of how important that Horizon was for the benefit of the business and sub-postmasters.
What was the atmosphere like in your mind at this meeting?
Well, we started off on a fairly jovial note, and there were some hard-hitting questions as well. I mean, it was quite a relaxed sort of session, but at the same point in time, there was some very serious business went on.
We can see in bullet point form the presentation that you gave there on the page, and if we turn over, we can see training, and under training, you reported that postmasters wish to extend managers' course to 2 days. However, Post Office believe this is not the case. For Dawn, that's you, having spoken to postmasters personally during site visits and even the night before, no one could state why they needed the extra time. Do you remember saying words to that effect?
Well, not entirely, no. But what I would point out, that this is a Fujitsu or ICL version of what I actually said. It would be far more accurate to actually have a look at what I said to the conference, which is a subject of another paper. I think it's NFSP 50436 from memory.
But sticking with your memory, we may turn that up in due course. Did you feel like sub-postmasters were asking for extra time and that this was unnecessary?
No, I didn't. No, I mean, I understood the concerns, and we'd addressed those concerns in what we'd actually put in place earlier in that year.
And turning down to the bottom of the page, you mentioned some of the serious issues that were being raised, and we can see here on the Q&A session, it says, when Leeds and Wakefield went live, 44 outlets, they were all promised support officers. 17 did not show, which caused major problems for the first week of balancing. Why offer or promise something and then not delivery? And then number 2, Mid Glamorgan is due to go live in June. 2 points for reference. phone call regarding training received before letter, and had to write 4 letters before receiving confirmation about installation date. Fault is bad communication. And third, 2 points. Help desk don't know the answer to questions when the phone is answered, which is not very often, usually just rings and rings. And management of training is appalling. Trainers know nothing about running a post office. And turning over the page, we can see some further issues there. How confident did you feel with dealing with some of these concerns that were raised?
Well, I didn't duck any of them. Clearly, I didn't know all the detail as well as those who were raising the issues, but it wasn't surprising that there were problems across the project, given the scale of it. I'm not surprised that some of these things happened. Excuse me.
Turning forward again slightly in time to the 18th of May 2000,
Before we do that, could you just remind me whose diary note is this?
This diary note, I think, is from Fujitsu. We can find that out.
Yeah, I'd like to know who it was exactly who made this diary note, if I could.
Yes, we'll find that out. Thank you, sir. Moving on to NFSP 50332. In this email, you're copied into an email about polling problems. Do you remember what polling problems were?
Indeed, yes. These were problems when the ICL server couldn't, in fact, collect information from the riposte message store in outlets for it to be then processed by back-end systems and client systems.
How concerned were you about this as a problem?
I was concerned about it, and it was the subject of discussions that we had with ICL ourselves, even before this problem manifested itself, on this occasion, that is. It was a big problem in the sense, particularly with clients customers rather, who had actually paid bills and whose record that they'd actually paid that bill was not then being processed by the appropriate client.
It sets out in this letter what the Federation would like to see, if we scroll down. Is this an instance of Colin Baker raising something urgently with you to investigate?
No, this wasn't raised with me directly. This was raised by somebody else.
And then copied into you?
And then copied into me, yes.
Is this the kind of thing that you would have taken forward?
Absolutely. We couldn't have let this one pass by because of the significance of it.
In this email, it mentions the NBSC. We're coming to the NBSC, but can you explain what that was and what your view of the NBSC was?
Well, the NBSC was the call centre that handled calls from post office outlets around transactions and accounting, and any issue which they identified was something that constituted a problem, they would create an incident on. And these incidents would be then passed to the business service management team who looked after service management issues for them to pursue to a conclusion.
If we could take that document down, please. During that year of 2000, there was also the development of a software update of the CSR Plus release. Could you tell us about that software release, please?
Well, this is the first major release since I joined the project. And it was designed to improve functionality on a number of matters. For example, smart cards, quantum gas, links with a logistic feeder service, and a number of other things. But it also, importantly, actually reduced the rollover time between cash accounts, which was a big thorn in the side of postmasters.
Did you feel like the release was being rolled out or developed quite soon after the project itself was rolled out? Did you have any concerns about how quickly it was being introduced?
Not really, no. I was more concerned about doing it alongside rollout, and also to ensure that it was done properly as well. There was quite a bit of information that had to be digested by sub-postmasters, and that was the subject of some training briefs and workbooks.
If we could turn up NFSP 50301, please. This is a letter that you wrote to the NFSP on the 3rd of August 2000, scrolling down. And under the first heading, it says this release, the rollout of Horizon continues to progress well and is currently ahead of schedule. The development of our next software release, CSR Plus, has also been progressing well against a very stretching plan. This release extends Horizon to include smart card capability, a link to distribution systems to enable improved provisioning of cash, and stock and significant updates to the infrastructure to improve system manageability and security. A process of reviewing the outputs of testing and the readiness of both Post Office Network and ICL Pathway to begin a trial of CSR Plus in 300 outlets has just been concluded. The objective of the process was to ensure that the software release could be introduced into the business without compromising our day-to-day operations. Now that Horizon is live in more than half the network, the process is particularly critical. Did you feel that you were being put under pressure, or there was pressure to roll out this additional release?
Well, there was obviously pressure of sorts because this was different to the standard work that we were doing. So we had to make sure that it was right and rolled out properly, so that there was no compromise to what we were doing.
If we scroll down again, it says ICL have identified a number of outstanding faults related to infrastructure enhancements that could create significant problems in the live environment if CSR Plus was introduced without them being fixed. They have advised that the start of the pilot should be postponed. We are fully in agreement with this recommendation. And if we could take that document down and move forward to NFSP 0050327. Thank you. So this is a short time later. And scrolling down again. Is this usual for there to have been this much correspondence between yourself and the NFSP at this time?
It was quite appropriate. I can't remember the frequency of how much we were in touch. I mean, we spoke a lot by telephone as well as in person. So it wasn't out of the ordinary, but it's quite appropriate to keep people informed with what's happening.
Picking it up, it says, since writing to you earlier today, we've held our meeting with ICL Pathway to review readiness to begin the pilot on the new software release CSR Plus. We have taken the decision to proceed with the data centre migration next weekend, subject to confirmation from ICL that they have robust plans in place to fix an intermittent problem around preservation of data when swapping faulty kit out on some multi-position counter terminals, and no new issues emerging in remaining tests next week. Surely it's better to have those safeguards in place first before deciding to continue with a release. Would you accept that?
Yes.
Do you feel like this was, or this symbolises the really the release being pushed through too quickly, or did you feel that this was appropriate?
No, it wasn't. I mean, there were certain safeguards there that we wanted to ensure before we agreed for it to go ahead, and that's in effect what this is saying.
Chair, now may be an appropriate time for a short break.
Yeah, that's fine.
Should we 11?
Yeah, certainly.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good morning, Chair.
Hi.
Mr. Gray, if we could pick up at NFSP 0000318, so 50318. Thank you. This is a letter dated the 25th of August 2000 that you sent to sub-postmasters, I think. Is that right?
I believe so, yes.
Did you often write directly to sub-postmasters?
No, no.
Was the reason you were writing sub-postmasters in this instance because of the big changes that were going to happen and the big requirements of them?
That's right. It was a very significant development and we needed everybody to be on board with it.
If we could scroll down that letter, it says, as you may be aware, we are shortly to undertake the next Horizon software release, known as CSR+. An inherent change in this release is to make improvements in cash remittances for the benefit of the business and users. The enclosed training package is essential reading to prepare you for these changes and explain the links with logistic feeder service. As a sub-postmaster or office manager, you must complete the whole workbook in advance of the upgrade being released. You will be advised of your upgrade date during the 3 weeks prior to the event. Please allow 2 hours for the workbook activity. Once your office has been upgraded, the workbook contains activities which can be taken in training mode to consolidate your learning, and you will need to allow yourself time to practice these. And looking down to the 4th paragraph, when training and consolidation has taken place, please complete and return the enclosed free post addressed response card to confirm that all training, including training briefs 27 and 28, which you will receive separately, have been undertaken by all concerned in your office. This is a mandatory requirement to confirm that all post offices are prepared for this change. The completed card must be returned within 5 working days of your upgrade. So this is a significant change, as you've already said. Did you feel like you were asking a lot of sub-postmasters to adapt to this changing computer system?
No, we didn't think we were asking a lot of them, but it was important that we actually had them properly prepared for the change, and that's the significance of this letter.
Did you feel that the post office equipped sub-postmasters well for this big change?
Yes, I don't think there was any great feedback to the contrary.
How did you ascertain whether or not people felt prepared for this change?
Really by feedback that we actually received by general means, either through the NBSC help desk or by feedback on outlet visits and contacts with NFSP reps.
So you didn't decide to conduct another research report at this time?
We did about this point in time because there was some further research done in the autumn of 2000. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to see that research other than by referencing to other documents. But I'm not sure that that research was done as a consequence of CSR Plus release. I think it was probably more just ongoing work to make sure that we were on the right track.
If we could turn forward to the 6th of September, and it's POL 00104602. And if we look at the bottom email, so this is an email from you to a group of people, including Keith Baines, and it attaches an initial draft of the NRO closed down report. And if we look over the page to page 2, we can see that this is your kind of draft report. What was this report and how did it come about?
Well, this is an essential part of ending a particular project to make sure that there a proper handover to enable any incomplete work to be conducted by others and to make sure that the full requirements of the project have actually been fulfilled.
If we turn over to page 5, we can see what you've just said reflected in the introduction. The completion of the national rollout of Horizon gives us the opportunity to take stock of achievements and experiences and provide a means of transferring incomplete activity to other functions. This process covers the work to wrap up the project, primarily to prepare input to the project board to obtain its confirmation that the project may close. And if we scroll down, outputs, it says the outputs from this paper will be a high-level plan which will define the steps that the NRO project board and management team must undertake to formally close the project. And under project closure, it says, to confirm that the project has delivered what was expected, the NRO project board will be asked to verify that. First, the Horizon implementation activity is complete and meets the needs of the business. Second, the satisfactory arrangements exist for the transfer of residual responsibilities to other business units. All project issues are closed or transferred to other functions to follow up. And turning over the page, all relevant project information is secured and archived or handed on as applicable to permit any future audit of the project actions and performance. All involved or interested parties are aware that the project is to be closed and resources disbanded. And scrolling down a bit further, it says the project manager has responsibility for the process and will maintain a regular dialogue with the project board to ensure there will be no problems with its confirmation of the project closure. And the key criteria to be applied are: have all the elements of the project initiation document been delivered, subject to any changes that may have been approved during the project life cycle? Are any deviations from the project initiation document addressed in project close down report, and is the project board still prepared to accept the project closure? When appropriate, are any deviations reflected in the follow-on action recommendations? Are the project board satisfied that any outstanding project issues have been battened past to others to pursue? Have gaining business units formally agreed to the transfer of residual responsibilities and signalled their readiness to accept the work? Are the project resources and support services not being transferred elsewhere no longer required? Are there any contractual implications when decommissioning the project? So in your mind, was this you setting everything up so that it can be assessed whether or not the criteria have been met by the project board?
Yes.
And who were on the project board? Who would be evaluating whether these things have been completed?
To be honest, that escapes me now. I just can't recall that information.
Would it have been someone around your level? Would it have been a different team?
No, I suspect it was probably at director level, which was one rung above me on the ladder.
And did you feel at the time that those people would have been qualified to make those calls?
Yes.
Turning forward to the 21st of September 2000, NFSP 50299. This is another letter from you to the NFSP. And if we look at the first paragraph, it says, thank you for your letter of the 15th of September about Horizon installation activity during December. Whilst I can fully appreciate the sensitivity of this issue, I was surprised by the tone, given the discussions we've had in recent weeks. Was this a time where a relationship with the NFSP was fraught or difficult?
No, I don't think so. I can't remember what the letter said on the 15th of September, but no, I would never describe the situation with the Federation as fraud. We used to speak our minds, but we were always very positive in the way that we tackled issues.
Turning then to the 5th of October 2000, if we could turn up NFSP 50289. This is an update that you provided to Mr. Baker, and if we could scroll down. Looking at national rollout progress, and if we can look at the training. Training over 60,000 people has not been without its problems. Course scheduling and occupancy levels have been major issues with ICL pathway over the recent months. Happily, their administration of user training events is now within acceptable bounds, but we now find ourselves in the position of training fewer people yet needing more courses than the contract provides for. To address the gap, we have developed a number of initiatives, including allocating 7 delegates to some courses, redistributing training costs, including making more prudent use of user awareness events, and extending the training window to 10 days before installation. The extension of the distance limit to 25 miles will also have a beneficial effect. Did you feel like you had to do the impossible or do a very difficult task in carrying out this training?
In this particular aspect of the training, yes, because we were getting towards the end of the project, having completed the first sweep over the country. And we were now faced with a situation where the problems with scheduling the events in the past had caught up with us. So we had to take some actions which we didn't want to take, but had to take to get through the project within the terms of the agreement with ICL.
What was morale like in your team at that time?
The morale in the team was always good. It was a good team. They were a cheerful bunch. They were very much a can-do bunch, and we just got on and did it.
Turning over to page 2. Scrolling down. Under live environment, help desk performance. Although there have been some blips as a result of recent incidents, such as the introduction of the Inland Revenue Working Families Tax Credit Facility, there has been an improvement on both Network Business Support Centre, the MBSC, and Horizon System Help Desk performance. The introduction of interactive voice response on the HSH on the 2 busiest days of the week, namely Wednesday and Thursday, was well received, though it did impair the percentage calls answered under 20 seconds as a consequence of the duration of the recorded message. This facility was introduced as a temporary expedient and is to be withdrawn next week now that all HSH operators are fully effective. Average number of weekly calls per outlet to HSH is currently 1.17 compared to 1.4 for the MBSC, which in itself is 5% lower than the regional helpline internal calls. MBSC are now achieving almost all their call handling performance in all dimensions. The latest time to answer performance is 8 seconds, with over 75% of calls now being resolved by the initial call handler. At this stage, did you feel like help desk performance was improving or had improved, and were you happy with it?
It had improved. We were always watching the performance of the Horizon System Help Desk, particularly because that had been a problem for some time, and we needed to make sure that it didn't deteriorate. By comparison, the MBSC at 8 seconds to answer calls was very much gold standard by comparison with call centres these days.
Turning on to page 4, please. It says staff and sub-postmaster feedback. The latest research across a sample of staff and sub-postmasters some 2 or 3 months after migration to Horizon indicates a better feel-good factor across the network. 94% find the system easy to use, 80% say user training is good, and 90% find balancing easier. Results show a significant positive movement on live trial and encouraging improvements on previous research in December 1999. Not surprisingly, sub-postmasters find transactions easier than balancing to master. After an intense training course, they need time for familiarisation with the system in their own environment. Other feedback from outlet visits, help desk calls and other communications, e.g. the sub-postmaster journal, echoes this feedback. So at this time, were you happy with the way that that feedback had tracked and that it had become more positive?
Indeed. I mean, this sort of vindicated the actions that we took at the beginning of that year to get results like this. And in fairness, when you look at those kind of percentages, I mean, there would be many retailers these days, if that was about their products, they were very satisfied with the situation.
Do you feel that issues with training might have masked data integrity issues? People thought that training issues or help desk problems were the cause of the problem, but in fact, with hindsight, it may have been data integrity.
I don't know. I don't feel I'm qualified to answer that particular question.
Is it fair to say at this time, in October 2000, you were assuming that the system wasn't causing balancing problems?
I wasn't aware of any balancing problems that were significant and that would cause any particular problem to the project, to the sub-postmasters or staff who were involved.
If we could turn up the next document from...
Sorry, Ms. Kennedy, just so that I'm not thinking a false point, could you go back a page, please,
Yes.
on that document? And it's at the bottom of that page 3. No, sorry, I seem to have... Can you start at the... Yeah, that's it. Cash accounts. You see that paragraph, which appears to be highlighted.
Yes.
What I wondered was this. If you read that paragraph to yourself, Mr. Gray, you'll see the last sentence in particular, the level of errors on horizon continues to fall, but is still not returned to pre-horizon levels. And that relates to cash accounts. I wondered if you could explain to me what that relates to so that I don't have any misunderstanding of it.
Indeed. Are we talking specifically about the last sentence, or would you like explanation about
the whole paragraph, please, but obviously in the context of that sentence.
Right. In terms of the unclaimed payments, uncharged receipts, these are discrepancies which have been identified and are awaiting error notices.
Yeah.
And there were fewer of these in the automated system, as one would expect. In fact, that's a benefit of automation. In terms of the authorised shortages, these would be amounts which were held in suspense pending further investigation, probably by the transaction processing team in Chesterfield, when the cash accounts were received by them, and they were able to match the cash account with the associated documents and correct any problems. Now, it's quite conceivable that there were more of those because the retail network managers were giving sub-postmasters the benefit of the doubt and putting the items into suspense to give the opportunity for these to be properly investigated.
Right.
In terms of the level of errors, I'm not quite clear what I was referring to there. But clearly I've had some information where I'm actually comparing it with what happened before.
Well, I mean, an interpretation of it is simply that there are user errors on horizon, which are greater than the user errors had been prior to horizon. But it's also possible that that is an acknowledgement that there are system errors on horizon. And I wondered if you could help me with that. And then secondly, the second part of the sentence, an analysis of root causes has led to a number of remedial actions being taken. I mean, what were the root causes and what were the remedial actions?
I cannot tell you what they are at this point in time.
All right.
But business service management had the responsibility for actually identifying the issues, analysing them, and trying to put things right where there was an identified cause. I don't think the level of errors is anything to worry about unduly. I think that is just a reflection of the fact that there were problems in the system as people got to grips with it. I was not aware of any system errors, so I don't think that is any undue concern at that particular point in time.
All right, thank you. Sorry, Ms. Kennedy, I just wanted to be as clear as I could be about what that paragraph meant.
Thank you, Chair. If we could turn up the next document then, POL 00104482. And this is from April 2001. And this is a report that you wrote. Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
It's called the Project Implementation Review, Horizon National Rollout. What was the purpose of writing this report?
This was really to prepare for the close down of the project, which was a few months away when this was done. And this was a draft document to prepare us for that eventuality.
How did you feel about the project at the time of writing this report? Did you think it had been a success?
I did, yes. I know it had been accompanied by various problems, but all in all, I think the achievement of everybody involved, including the sub-postmasters, was one that reflected with credit on them.
In this report, you go through a number of issues or themes to do with the system. I wonder if we could turn up page 2, please. And scroll down. And down again, please. So at 2.2, satisfactory rollout of Horizon to all outlets, taking remedial action to secure business performance by initiating or developing policies or frameworks as appropriate. So what was this about? What was this heading analysing? Do you remember?
Not specifically. No, this I think was just to make sure that we could maintain the business, having rolled out Horizon to the outlets.
If we could go over the page, and we look at the first full bullet point, it says the absence of a coherent and robust outlet and product reference system was evident at various times during the project. Do you remember what that means or meant?
Yes. That's related to the nature of the outlets. Each sub-post office was quite unique. There were no, or very rarely, two sub-post offices that were identical. And what that was relating to was some kind of registry, if you like, of what each office looked like and what facilities it had.
And if we could turn over to page 5, please. And scroll down, please. So you've got performance operational, and then scrolling down again, please. Performance technical. So were those divided in between the operation of the system on the ground and then technically the detail that's kind of in the back office or on the computer system itself?
Sorry, I'm not.
So what is the difference between performance operational and performance technical?
Right. Well, operational will be what actually happened out in the field. The technical would be the system and the way it was put together and rolled out.
If we look at performance technical, it says technical oversight and validation of ICL pathway activities was almost non-existent compared with the preceding live trial and development phase. Although this was not really a problem, it is an area that should not be overlooked either in the Horizon maintenance phase or in future projects. What did you mean by that?
I think that relates to the fact that it had changed from being a sort of a three-party project to a two-party project. And it became a much more commercial contract arrangement. And there wasn't the same kind of sharing that actually went on when it was a combined project.
Did you feel it would have been helpful if things had stayed the way that they were? It was more cooperative?
No, I'm not suggesting it should have carried on as they were, but I think there was certainly scope for improved cooperation between ourselves and Pathway. The relationship with ICL was constructive and cordial, but there are times when we feel that we weren't treated as a valued customer and being given all the information that we felt we had a right to know about.
What information was that you felt you didn't have?
Well, it related to particular problems. There were times when we felt we might be being fobbed off, that there was either for cultural, commercial or other reasons, we weren't being told all the information that we should really have been given.
We turn on to page 6, please. And scrolling down. We have recommendations, supplier issues. And looking at the second bullet point, well, let's look at the first bullet point. It says the project, understandably for its size and nature, had a heavy contractual overlay. Despite best endeavours to establish open, constructive, customer-focused and forward-looking relationships with ICL Pathway directors, we did not succeed in mirroring the relationships which existed at working level. Consequently, consideration ought to be given in similar supplier-dominated projects in future as to how we can secure commercial benefit via a more creative, constructive and less restraining joint working or partnership arrangement at all levels, so that both parties secure a win-win position. And the second bullet point, we should never again put ourselves in the position of dependence on either a sole supplier or indeed supplier-dominated project progress information without first establishing a defined and adequate contingency. At the outset, we should assure customer preeminence with any future supplier who must commit to identify, agree and deliver to our requirements, including detailed performance metrics and integrated reporting structures. Furthermore, any future supplier must empower their local field teams to mirror the responsibilities we invest in our people. So what are you saying there?
Effectively, we're saying that the customer has got to come first, and we've got to make sure that any contractual arrangement we have with any future supplier has got to recognise that, and we build the project around it.
What about the first line? We should never again put ourselves in the position of dependence on either a sole supplier. What's the learning point from dependence on a sole supplier?
Well, in a sense, because the history on this particular project, we were left with effectively no alternative but to go with ICL. And maybe what should have been a preferable route is to have competitive tendering.
If we could turn over to page 8 of that document. And scroll down, please. Under training, it says all training courses and training content to undergo more in-depth development and quality checks prior to delivery to ensure user comfort. Training should be viewed as a process rather than an event and ensure it caters for different learning pace, styles and requirements. A one-size-fits-all approach is not always appropriate, especially if an established learning environment does not exist. Were you disappointed with the level of training when you first came on board versus by the end of this, after all your efforts?
I think perhaps it hadn't been given the attention that perhaps it had deserved. But in fairness, there was a lot of other issues going on at the same point in time. But in fairness, we rescued the situation. And whilst there might have been some hiccups along the way, I think we got through it pretty well despite.
And even in light of these problems that you've flagged in the report, were you optimistic about the continued involvement of ICL going forward?
I wasn't particularly optimistic. I mean, it was something that we needed to keep our eye on. Once I got to business service management, it was fairly clear we had to monitor the Horizon System Help Desk performance on an ongoing basis because that was still an issue. So we couldn't take our eye off the ball at all.
Moving forward to the 26th of November, if we could pull up FUJ 00119979. These are the notes of a Horizon Service Review Forum, and we can see there that you were the chair of this. What was the Horizon Service Review Forum?
Well, as it says there in the purpose statement towards the bottom of that page, it was to discuss with ICL how they were meeting their performance objectives.
How useful did you find this as a forum?
To be honest, I'd forgotten we ever had these, but clearly it was a means of actually debating face to face the real issues of the day.
How often did these take place? Do you remember?
I think these took place on a monthly basis, though I have a feeling about this point in time it actually reduced to 2 monthly.
And if we turn on to page 2, we can see the notes, and we can have the action point number. We see the action point number, the details, date to be completed by, the owner, the actions taken, and the action point status. So at these meetings, did someone raise an issue, someone made a note of it, and then it was tracked? Is that how that took place?
Yes.
And were the action point, how were they carried forward?
Well, they were tracked at each meeting, so it was actually being work that was being taken away from the meeting and done offline, so to speak. And the meeting maintained an oversight to make sure that progress was being maintained towards resolution.
And did you find this, that relationships were good in this forum and that it was useful?
Yes, I think again there was the issues about the not always sharing information with us, but yes, they were generally useful. And in fairness, I think we got a fair bit done. There is an example in another document that I've seen, which relates to the fact that we were working together to have a better service for the post offices by a closer arrangement between the Horizon System Help Desk and the MBSC.
Turning forward to the 1st of December 2001, if we could turn up FUJ 00120085. This is an ICL document. It's a customer satisfaction scorecard. So you wouldn't have seen this at the time, would you?
Well, I think I must have done, because down the bottom there it's got signed by head of BSM, or a space for it anyhow.
So,
And I suspect this was something that was actually being pioneered.
And so do you remember receiving these on a regular basis and signing them?
I don't remember doing so. I don't know whether this was a prototype which never took off, or whether it was something that did, in fact, become a regular occurrence. I can't recall, honestly.
Turning over to the second page. It says scorecard quarter ending November 2001, and it says downgrade, difficult and thought-provoking exercise. Paul comments sometimes reflects ICL pathway in general. Do you have any idea what this is about, or do you remember saying this? How would this be recorded?
Well, this is relating to the scorecard we've just been looking at. And this what makes me think it might have been a prototype that were actually being suggested by ICL as a means of actually doing on a regular basis. But whether it ever took off regularly, I don't know.
Did you find it a difficult and thought-provoking exercise?
I must have done to say that, yeah.
If we could then turn up FUJ 30800421. This is from the 25th of September 2002. And this is an agreement about the interaction between the NBSC and the Horizon System Help Desk. Do you remember how well these two helpline entities were working together at this time?
Well, I think there was a sense of operating in different silos initially, and this was an attempt to really bring them together and to try and make them seamless as far as the post offices were concerned.
So this was produced in recognition of a problem about the fact that the two were working in silos and there needed to be greater cooperation?
Yes, it was more a recognition of an improvement opportunity rather than a problem, I think.
And And if we turn over to page 7, for example, and scrolling down, and down again, please, we can see that the scope of the document is set out. How the MBSC and HSH will provide a seamless incident management service to Post Office and agreed POL and Fujitsu Services pathway support groups. And looking down at the bottom of the page, it says the document defines exceptional event as an event that may cause a 75% increase in call volume and or is likely to impact the operation of the call management process. Under these circumstances, direct communication will take place between HSH and NBSC. Was that the real concern, that both parties should be sharing information on when something is likely to increase call volumes?
That was one of the issues it was trying to address. The other was to make sure that people weren't being passed between call centres unnecessarily.
And was that the feedback that you were receiving at this time, that people were being passed between them?
No, but we identified it as a way that we could actually provide a better service together.
And if we could turn up page 14, please. We have some diagrams, if we can scroll down. This is the interface between the NBSC and HSH. And were these provided to helpline operatives?
To be honest, I don't know where these ended up. I mean, they were part of this particular document, but I would have expected that they would have been provided to call handlers in a much more understandable way than this document.
By the time you left, how well did you feel these two systems operated, cooperating with one another?
Much better, but still scope for improvement.
What did you think that could have been improved?
There were things that could be improved. I can't remember what they were specifically, but we could never take our foot off the pedal, because we needed to make sure that the performance didn't falter.
Mr. Gray, those are all the questions that I had for you. Chair, do you have any questions at this stage?
No, thank you very much, no.
I think Mr. Jacobs has some questions, as does Miss Patrick and Mr. Henry. Starting with Mr. Jacobs.
Thank you, sir. Can I just confirm that you can hear me?
Yes, I can, yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Gray, good morning. I want to ask you some questions on behalf of the 156 sub-postmasters, mistresses, assistants and managers that I represent, instructed by Howe & Co. And in particular, some points you make in your statement about the Horizon Help Desk and the user manual and the Christmas Horizon Research Report. So could we perhaps go to paragraph 4E of your statement, which deals with the Horizon Help Desk, and that's at page 7 of 26, WITNO 5220100. Just waiting for it on the screen there. So you can see that in that statement, you say at the end, in relation to the help desk, the time to answer and the quality of responses was regularly monitored and improvements were made when required. Do you accept that's what you say about how the Post Office dealt with the help desk?
Yes.
Now, and in your evidence this morning, you said it was clear that we had to monitor the Horizon System Help Desk performance as an ongoing issue, so we couldn't take our eye off the ball at all. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Did you listen to the evidence that was given by sub-postmasters in phase 1 of this inquiry from February to May 2022?
No, I haven't.
I wanted to put to you some of what the sub-postmasters, whose evidence was uncontested, said about the help desk in this inquiry. We've looked at 102 of our clients' statements. 50 of them gave evidence live, the rest were read into the record. 88 of our clients gave evidence that Horizon staff were incompetent. Is that something that you knew about, that was the general view about help desk staff?
No, not at all. I think we need to distinguish between the two help desks. The Network Business Support Centre I would not describe as incompetent, nor would I do so for the Horizon System help desk. There were resourcing issues and scheduling issues at the Horizon System help desk at certain points in time, and they were addressed after we made some challenges to get them to improve their service. What point in time are we actually talking about with those statements, as a matter of interest?
Throughout the course of the scandal, from rollout through to the litigation, a wide variety of time ranges.
Right. Well, I'm talking about the time that I was actually with the project and with business service management, which ended in early 2003.
Yes, of course. And of course,
I can't say.
You can only give evidence from what you experienced. So in the time that you were involved, our clients, 18 of them say that when they eventually got through to the helpline, the people who were supposed to be helping them were just reading from a script. Is that something that you're aware of, a complaint that you
It's
received?
not a complaint. I mean, core handlers do work from scripts, and that's very important to make sure that there's consistency of message.
Did you see the scripts that the call handlers were working from?
I must have seen them at some point in time, but I wasn't involved in vetting them and making sure they were fit for purpose. That was the responsibility of others in the team.
Can you describe what the scripts looked like, what the format was from the ones that you saw?
Not from memory, I can't know.
One of the issues that sub-postmasters have raised, 39 of our clients say they were told, expressly told, that they were the only person experiencing problems with the Horizon system. Now that's a theme that emerged from the evidence. And we say it can't be a coincidence. Are you aware that there was anything to that effect within the scripts themselves?
Not that I am aware of, and I wouldn't be too happy about that message actually being given out. Do we know which help desk we're talking about?
This is the Horizon help desk.
Right, this is the ICL one.
Yes.
Right.
36 of our clients were told you have to pay the shortfall because under your contract you are bound to do so. Is that advice that you recall being given?
Well, sub-postmasters had the responsibility for making good losses. That was part of the contract. And it's quite conceivable there was something to that effect in the scripts. But as I say, I can't recall.
If the inquiry wanted to, and this is a fishing expedition, Sarah, and I apologise for that. If the inquiry wanted to find these scripts, do you know who might have them or where they might be located?
I don't know where they would be now, but in my day, they would be in each of the respective help desks.
You see, our clients say, all of them say, that the help desk service was woeful and that it did not improve. Do you accept that there is a significant disconnect between the uncontested evidence of sub-postmasters in this inquiry and your evidence that the Post Office monitored it, made sure that there were improvements and kept their eye on the ball?
I don't accept there is that disconnect. I mean, clearly there are people who would not be too happy with the service that may have been provided at various stages in the project, even in basic business as usual operations. It's unfortunate, but those are issues that need to be addressed specifically at the time.
I'm going to move on in a minute, but I just want to take you to your statement again and what you say at paragraph 4.
You're very quiet now, Mr. Jacobs.
sir.
Can you address that, please?
Yes, I think that's a bit closer. You say at paragraph 4E, the time to answer and the quality of responses was regularly monitored and improvements were made where required. In hindsight, in relation to the evidence that this inquiry has heard and accepted, do you accept that that statement is not correct?
No, I don't accept it's incorrect. We did, in fact, monitor the performance of both help desks, and we did make improvements.
Okay. Well, we'll move on. In relation to the user guide or help book, you say that the Christmas research report said that just over half, that's 55% of users found this guide helpful. Not one of our clients.
Got the Horizon user guide here?
This is the Horizon user guide or handbook that you are referring to at force F in your statement. All post offices were issued a practical user handbook, the Horizon Guide, to explain in detail Horizon operations and assist their move to the new system. It's that guide I'm referring to.
Right.
Nor one of our clients has said that this guidebook was of any use to them whatsoever. What do you have to say about that?
Well, there were a number who would prefer to phone the help desk rather than read the guide. And that, I think, is also covered in the research.
Do you agree, with the benefit of hindsight, that the Horizon Christmas Research Report, even though it was relatively negative feedback, nevertheless overstated the usefulness of this guide to sub-postmasters when the problem started to materialise?
No, and I don't accept that the research report was negative. There was some positive information in there as well, some very real improvement opportunities, but it certainly wasn't negative in total.
Mr. Gray, a large number of my clients and a very large number of sub-postmasters were very badly let down by the help desk. Do you have anything that you would like to say to them?
Well, all I can say is I'm sorry to hear that. And had I known that at the time that I was in charge of the help desks, I would have certainly taken that forward on their behalf.
And finally, a significant number of sub-postmasters have said that they were advised by a help desk that they were the only ones experiencing problems with the Horizon system. Do you have anything to say to that?
Again, that is not a very helpful comment to make. And had I known that at the time, then that again would have received my attention.
I'm just going to ask if there are any more questions that I have to ask you. No, that's it. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Ms. Patrick?
Thank you. Mr. Gray, my name's Angela Patrick. Can you see and hear me?
I can indeed, yes.
I act for a number of sub-postmasters with Mr. Maloney, KC, instructed by Hudgels, and our clients, over 60 of them, were convicted, but have since had their convictions quashed. We'd like to ask you a few questions about one issue, and I hope you'll be glad to hear it's not about training and it's not about the help desk. Can we look again at the letter that you've been taken to this morning that was sent to you in May 2000? And you've seen a lot of documents, so I'll bring it up so you can see it. It's NFSP 50332. And if you remember, this was a letter about non-polling. Can you see it now?
I can, yes.
And that page is pretty familiar to you because Miss Kennedy's taken you through some of this already. And if you remember, it was about non-polling, which I think you recalled was a significant problem.
It was a problem.
Yeah.
Significant perhaps might be going too far, but at particular points in time, it may have been.
Okay. but I want to look at the second page. If we can turn over, and specifically I want to look at the second paragraph, if that could be highlighted for you. If we see there, after the meeting this afternoon, I received a phone call from Colin Baker, and he tipped me off that the DTI representative at the conference had reported back the problems with polling, and that Alan Johnson, Minister for Competitiveness at the DTI and responsible for the Post Office, has asked for a copy of the transcript of this part of the conference. Now, you said this morning that you were being copied in on a lot of things that really wouldn't specifically require your attention. With this, the minister responsible for the Post Office seemingly expressing an interest in or a concern about non-polling be a significant issue?
Yes, this coincided with me being at the conference as well. And as I recall, this actually happened while I was either at the conference or in transit from it.
Yeah. And this was you essentially being alerted to the minister being aware of these problems, wasn't it?
Yes, indeed.
And it was really something that you ought to have been aware of, wasn't it?
Yes, indeed. And I was, in fact, copied in on that correspondence. But what they had actually initiated was an inquiry in my absence to actually identify what had been going on.
Can you remember what the Post Office Horizon team did with this information and what happened next?
I think if we scroll on that document or associated document with that, I think there was some indication of what actually happened, that someone had picked this one up and was actually running with it.
And I think we can see that it's, can you go back to Colin and reassure him? And it has a number of bullet points there, but none of them appear to relate to the minister. Do you know if you contacted the minister or his team?
I didn't contact the minister or his team, no. No. I don't know who had that responsibility, but I wasn't the only one that was copied in on this letter.
Do you know if anybody else in your team may have spoken to him or his team?
No, I doubt it, but it is possible. Something like this would normally be handled by the public relations people, I suspect.
And who was above you in the management line between you and the board at this time?
Well, David Smith was my boss. He was Director of Automation and he was actually on the board.
And I think Stuart Sweetman told us he was Director at POCL till November 2001, is that right?
Stuart himself, you mean?
Stuart Sweetman?
Yes, Stuart Sweetman was the managing director, as I understand it. I think was his title.
Okay. You said this morning you were aware of Mr. Johnson giving evidence to the inquiry. Did you listen to his evidence or did you read it?
No, I listened to it.
Okay. I think just to refresh your memory, his evidence put briefly was that ministers were really looking to the future for Horizon rather than the technical problems. And he said in his statement, no one was flagging up major concerns. Everyone's attention was on the new work that Horizon could attract. And the inquiry's seen some examples of this. And I'll bring it up just in case you haven't seen it. We've had it this morning, NFSP 40436. And if we look at the bottom of page 2 in that document, it's the report of the conference that we've been talking about. We can see that there was an address by the minister.
Yes.
We don't need to look at it all. He talks about his long connection with the Post Office, his admiration for people working with the Post Office, and he describes the institution as the Methuselah of the public sector. We don't need to look at it all. The inquiry's seen the evidence before, unless you need to see some of it. On page 5, he turns to Horizon, and I'll paraphrase. He talks about the government's decision to get Horizon back on track, ACT being inevitable, and opportunities for the Post Office in network banking and the universal bank. He ends on the government's vision, and he talks about the promise of the universal bank and banks being attracted by the incentive of the Horizon automation platform. Was that your recollection, that ministers, Fujitsu and the Post Office were all at this time all focused first on the opportunities for Horizon?
That was the bigger picture, but on the ground, we were very much focused on making the project work.
Yeah, for those opportunities to work, first Horizon had to work, didn't it?
Indeed.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions for you, Mr. Gray.
Mr. Henry.
Hello, Mr. Gray. Can you hear me, sir?
I can.
Good. You've already been shown today, so there's no need for it to be put up on the screen. NFSP 50287. And I suggest that it's apparent from that document that you are trying to drill down and investigate glitches, and you were taken to that document by Ms. Kennedy. But you, of course, were the National Rollout Manager appointed in January 2000, but from July 2001, you moved into the BSM function, didn't you?
Yes.
And then, of course, you retired in March 2003.
Mm-hmm.
Correct?
Yes.
And so what I want to sort of try and explore with you are perhaps a change in culture after you left, because I've been given permission to ask you about events that occurred in 2005. Do you follow?
Yes.
Right. Now, you say at various points in your statement, and I'm not going to go to them because you've adopted it, but just for your benefit, sir, and for the chair's benefit, your paragraph 10D at page 20 of 26, that BSM would try to, and I'm gisting this, BSM would try to resolve issues with root cause analysis and transparency, good communication, etc., etc. You agree? Mm-hmm. That's what you said. Yes. Paragraph 11A, page 21, that bugs, errors and defects, they weren't hidden, they were dealt with candour and openness. Mm-hmm. Correct? And then paragraph 13, this is about error reporting, paragraphs 23 to 26. Error reporting, essentially, there was an open business culture, that people were encouraged to report errors and errors weren't being suppressed.
That's right.
Now, sir, have you read, and no criticism if you have not, but have you read any of the judgments of Mr. Justice Fraser, such as the Common Issues judgment or the Horizon IT judgment?
No, I haven't.
You haven't. Did it ever come to your attention, directly or indirectly, while you were at the post office, that sub-postmasters were not being told about known errors in the Horizon IT system?
No, but there was no widespread arrangement to tell sub-postmasters about every problem. Where it was important to them, we would actually communicate that to them. But there were times when many of these, if you like, were transparent and not apparent at the outlet level, where they were not communicated.
Well, where did this no need to know or need to know culture originate? Because it follows, doesn't it, that somebody is making a judgment about what the end user needs to know about apparent errors in the system.
Where there was any effect on the users, they were advised about the situation. If it didn't affect the user, there was no need to know, because there was lots going on in the background about trying to improve issues between ourselves and ICL, which had no impact on the local user in terms of them knowing about any potential problems.
Upon whom were you relying for information about whether this would, to use your words, impact or not affect the end user?
We were relying on general feedback from the field, from the help desks, and from anybody who may have been involved in identifying what the root cause of that particular problem was. There was a long time been a requirement from some postmasters that they wanted simpler and fewer messages. And what we didn't want to do was to burden them unnecessarily with communications which had not, in our view, in the light of the information we received, had any impact on them.
This is very much, is it not, a sort of patriarchal or patronizing approach, in the sense that you are making value judgments about what the children need to know, aren't you?
No, I don't accept that. What we are doing is we're exercising proper judgment and sharing with them as appropriate.
Can I just ask you to go back to your previous answer to me, because you were saying you were relying on information that was coming in from the field and also the help desk. Do you remember saying that just a short while ago? So it follows that this information, that it doesn't need to be disseminated, is coming from among the field, in other words, the branches, and also sub-postmasters calling the help desk. How could that not affect or potentially affect other postmasters?
It depends on the nature of the problem. You see, what we're talking here is quite generally, there could be specific problems which were not apparent to the postmasters, which we were actually dealing with ourselves behind the scenes.
Well, that wouldn't, of course, arise from the field or the help desk, would it?
No, it wouldn't, but that was one of the other issues that that was relevant at the time.
Right. And just coming back to your immediate last answer, that's precisely the problem, isn't it? That postmasters weren't aware. We've seen evidence, for example, of the help desk where, and this was put to Mr. Terry Austin, this document. Did you know Terry Austin?
I don't know him, I know the name.
You know the name. Did you have an opportunity to look at his evidence?
No.
No. Well, fair enough. Where the help desk is being criticised by Mr. Colin Baker because sub-postmasters don't know that these errors are occurring. A number of things are just happening, as it were, without their knowledge, and they are unsighted on these errors.
Which help desk are we talking about, and at what point in time?
Well, that was not the NBSC, that was the Horizon Services Help Desk.
Right, which we have no direct responsibility for.
Of course, but you, being, as it were, the correspondent party, the client, Post Office POCL, you would obviously be very concerned about that, wouldn't you? Or ought to have been.
Sure, if we were aware of it, yes.
And can I just ask you this, and this is around about 2000, this document. In fact, it is 2000. Can I just ask you, please, casting your mind back, surely that concern must have been drawn to your attention then.
I wasn't aware of it.
And you, of course, were the Horizon National Rollout Project Manager,
Yes,
and you weren't aware of it.
But without responsibility for the live environment at that point in time.
And why, as the national rollout project manager, did you not have responsibility for the live environment?
Because that was the responsibility of others. I
But-
didn't have responsibility for all the Horizon project, only for actually the preparation, the training, the installation of the system across the network.
I see. And so, with this, as it were, fragmentation of information with these hermetically sealed managerial boxes, are you telling the chair that you did not know about this?
Yes.
And do you think that that was an optimal way of rolling out a system?
Well, it was for others to actually have that responsibility, and it could well be that others knew about it. Clearly, if it had an impact on the rollout, then I would have liked to have known about it.
Can I ask you, please, were you aware, and this is both the Horizon Services Help Desk, so therefore the ICL, but also the MBSC, were you aware that they were advising SPMs to carry on balancing to produce cash accounts in order to roll over? In other words, they couldn't roll over unless they accepted figures that they disputed.
I couldn't answer that question. I wasn't aware of it, but I have become aware of it, having seen some documents and watched the various testimonies to the inquiry.
And that would have been, in your view, utterly unacceptable, would it not?
Well, there was a way of actually dealing with situations like this. The amount would have been put into suspense, the account could have been rolled over, and that would give more time for the amount in suspense to be properly investigated and reasons found for it.
When was the suspense function removed from the system during your time at the post office or afterwards?
I think it must have been afterwards. I don't recall that.
I see. But anyway, without, as it were, offering a solution, I'm just asking you to comment on the problem. And the problem was that they were quite frequently being advised by both HSD and also MBSC to accept and roll over, notwithstanding the dispute. I ask you again, that would be wholly irregular, wouldn't it?
It would seem to be so, but we had an arrangement where that could have been properly accounted for. And that was established, and that should have been followed.
So it was wholly irregular.
I wouldn't like to.
Why not? Why would you not like to say, when you have said that, first of all, that isn't the right advice, and secondly, there was a potential solution, and that advice that they were given completely ignored that, as you have posited, that potential solution?
Well, I'm sure you're quite sincere in what you're saying. I would want to find out more information before I could make a statement like that.
Right. Okay. I'm now going to come to a matter that occurred outside your remit, and I would be very grateful. This document, sir, has been notified to the Post Office, and it's the evidence of Mr. Kelly during the human impact statements on the 1st of March 2022, and I would like to take it from page 77 of that transcript. Page 77 of that transcript, sir, from the 1st of March. Sorry? Oh, I see. It was actually in the Rule 10 question that we were given permission to ask, but not to worry. I can just go to the gist. Don't worry about it. I'll just go to the gist. This gentleman, sir, long after you'd retired, had identified a bug. And it was a bug that would double up. So in other words, you would enter, let's say, a £200 British Telecom bill, and then the system would think that there were 2 times £200 British Telecom bills. And similarly, you might put in a £400 deposit and it would come up as 2 £400 deposits. And so it would double up deposits and withdrawals, and also sometimes liabilities for, let's say, paying a bill. Do you follow?
Yes.
Now, this gentleman whose family
Was this a
had been...
postmaster, incidentally?
This gentleman was a postmaster, but he was also a computer science graduate, and his family had had generations of postmasters, and he just wanted to help his mum out because she was not particularly well at the time. So he came in and tried to help her out. And he communicated this to both the post office helpline and also the Fujitsu helpline. Okay, do you follow?
I do, yes.
And he was told that they were not going to send a memo out to tell people. They were not going to do that. They were just going to let it carry on. That's hardly open and transparent, is it?
I agree.
Now, if you were in charge, then you would not have let that happen, would you? If that had come to your attention.
Had I known about it individually, yes.
And had you known about it, because now I want to explore, from that problem being notified to both the Pathway or Fujitsu at that time help desk and also the post office MBSC help desk, how many layers of management were there before it would have got to you when you were both, first of all, in your role as rollout manager, but then head of BSM? How many parts of the hierarchy would it have to ascend before it got to you?
Probably 3 or 4. But there was a recognised process for dealing with these. An incident like that should have been referred to business service management to actually do an analysis of that particular problem and to pursue a solution.
And the upshot of that gentleman's evidence was that, to his knowledge, no other sub-postmasters were alerted to the existence of this bug.
Well, if he says that, fine. I can't say what happened after I left the business, though.
And, of course, in 2005, you'd been gone for 2 years. But may I ask you, please, since that time, from information you have read, did you ever become aware of the Calendar Square bug?
No.
You don't? Well, then I ask you no questions about that. Thank you very, very much, sir. And thank you, sir, for allowing me to ask those questions.
So is that all the questions for Mr. Gray?
Yes, Chair.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Gray, for coming to give oral evidence this morning and answering questions from a number of people. I'm grateful to you.
Thank you, sir.
Chair, that's our only witness for today, so we're back tomorrow at 10 a.m. with Miss Rita Palmer and then Mr. Trevor Rollison.
Yes, Mr. Rollison was due to give evidence today, was he not? But there's been some difficulty in arranging that. How confident are we that he can give evidence tomorrow, if you know the answer, Ms. Kennedy? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Can I put it this way, Chair? Reasonably. Reasonably.
All right. And the plan is that we start with Miss Palmer, and then because Mr. Rollison is remote, he can carry on after she finishes, after a suitable break. Yeah.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. All right then. Until tomorrow, bye-bye.
Thank you.